Welcome again to Night Talk, everybody. And as I said at the top of the show, this should be an interesting evening. Already we have gotten phone calls and even a couple of letters from people expressing some concern, but a lot of interest in what we're going to talk about tonight. The issue is the punk movement, if indeed they want to be called punkers here in central Indiana. And I'd like to introduce our guests right away and get right into the discussion. Our first guest is Juliet Johnson, and Julie is 22 years old. She works at Carfax, which is a local store here in Broad Ripple. They tell me it's So-Bro, is that right? Not Broad Ripple. That sells fashion associated with the movement, the punk movement. Also joining us is Paul Mahern. Paul is 21 years old. He is the owner of Affirmations Records, which is a local record company, correct? And finally, 28-year-old Bill Levin, who they tell me is a registered Republican, which is why Reagan is going to win by a landslide. Everybody obviously is voting for him. And Bill is the owner of Carfax, and we'll talk about what they do there over at Carfax and find out some more interesting things about Mr. Levin. And finally, our fourth guest is Johnny Quest, and Johnny also works over at Carfax. He is the artist in residence. And thank you all for being with us. And Bill Levin, I just have to ask you one thing. Honestly, does your mother know you're here tonight?
Yes, she does. Hi, Mom. I hope you're feeling better.
Is that a problem for you?
No.
Not at all? Really? Is it a problem for her? I guess is the question.
She's like every other mother.
Really?
Yeah.
She doesn't say, a nice Jewish boy like you, what are you doing with purple hair?
She would prefer me to be a doctor, but she understands this.
Does she really indeed?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Mediums, the videos that are being shown were picked out by us. But I think in general, the mass media has treated it either as a joke or something that's very violent, and has focused mainly on the negative aspects and completely skimmed over the positive aspects.
Sex sells.
Yeah.
If there's violence and sex in anything, that'll be the first thing they'll propagate.
I mean, that's what the media will propagate.
Yeah.
But that's what you're propagating, isn't it?
Not violence and sex.
No?
No.
Well, I think it's people, being nearsighted, basically, there's a lot more into it than that. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of positive things that have come out of the punk movement. Mm-hmm. And that is, such as 13-year-old kids in high school putting out their own fanzines, showing their own opinions, their own political opinions. Bands forming in a little garage, and in 6 months they put out their own record, distribute it themselves. They completely do it without any outside, help. Mm-hmm. But I think that the media, if anything, has made it seem violent, and so it has gotten more violent. Violent people are attracted to it. Someone is naturally violent or naturally disturbed, and they see on TV that punk is for violent people, and so therefore they think that's for them.
Silent speech.
Yeah.
Individuality.
That's the main thing, Probably some of the main, rules of philosophy of punk or whatever are a bit of anarchy, if not political, personal, do what you want, question authority, do not let someone tell you what to do without first understanding what is going on. Do what you want to do. It's just basically be yourself. And I think that there's people all over the world who are punks that, that's their basic philosophy.
Well, hippies are frowned on a lot as being old,
A lot of the
like me.
parents are hippies.
Yeah. What? I don't understand what we're talking about here. We're talking about a word, punk. It's nothing more than a word. I am only here trying to defend this word punk because someone else labeled the kind of music that I listen to and the attitude that I have punk. Mm-hmm. So I find myself here defending that when, it has a negative meaning in no matter what definition you put to it. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's something that if people can see beyond that word, that frightening word, they can see that it's really not a whole lot different than the hippie movement.
Mm-hmm. Enjoy costumes. I enjoy costumes. I enjoy being flamboyant.
To you, that isn't it possible that if all of this stuff is important, then if people looking at you dressed like that, you probably have trouble walking down the street, don't you?
No, I put one foot in front of the other. I'll dress like that.
Just because people on the street see Bill and think that he's weird looking, what does that have really to do with anything? I'm sure you applaud. In fact, they did applaud, but there may be other points of view. Let's take another call right now. Go ahead, please.
I'm wondering if you're all involved in drugs.
Okay, now wait a second. Hold it a second. That's a damn good question. It's a good question because it speaks to what I'm talking about, and if that's the image. Why do you ask that question?
Well, that's the...
No, be honest. Is that an assumption that you make?
Yes. I mean, look at them.
Because I didn't hear what you said.
Look at them.
Okay, you are. You know, I agree with the people up here. I don't want to pursue this at too great a length, but let's get it over with. By their appearance, you are making that assumption.
Yes.
Okay, let me ask you. Let's talk about drugs then. It's a fair question. Is there any general feeling about that, or do you think it's no different than the general population? But I want everybody to speak to it. Julie?
I don't drink. I don't do drugs. So it's, obviously it's not a important part of it.
Is that typical?
Well, a lot of my friends don't drink or do drugs. Some do, some don't.
It would be the same with any walk of life. There's people who drink, people who don't, people who do drugs, people who don't.
You really don't think that for the people in general involved in this, that there's a greater incidence of that than in the regular population?
No.
Come on, Johnny, tell me
Not
honestly.
at all.
Definitely not.
I think you find more businessmen on cocaine than you will find people here in this audience that do that much drugs. And that's the honest God truth. For 20 years, people have associated drugs with rock and roll. Hardcore punk was just about the first form of rock and roll to come along that I know of, where in some of the songs and in some instances they're singing about not doing drugs and about how you should think about how you're messing up your life in various forms. It's, some of this music is consciousness, raising.
Okay.
Yes, I think that these guys that are punk rockers, they were outcasts. They find this is something to cling on to, punk rock is something to cling on to for them, so that they're, they were outcasts before, and now they find this punk rock or something to cling on to for whatever reason. They were,
You get, the young kids, they see Boy George on MTV, and they feel that they just want to rebel against what's around them, so they dress in a certain way, or they think they're being punk or whatever. But it is breaking them away from society's mold. And eventually, even if they're following what is now a trend, they will see by reading the punk magazines that the ideology behind punk is to be a free thinker. And then they will realize if they really want to be a punk, they'll be a free thinker. So here you have this trendy person who is into it for trendiness 2 years down the road, and they're still into it. I've been listening to this kind of music since I can remember.
Okay, but by your own admission, though, there is an imitative aspect of it that speaks exactly against the idea of being an individual.
In the 50s? Well, do you don't think that things have changed? I mean, look at why. Do you think that things are really so much better now that people aren't singing protest songs? Or do you think that the mass media has just kind of squelched it out? They don't want to hear it anymore.
Saying, you asked him if the music was any more violent, and I just said, in my opinion, no, towards, if you listen to Beethoven, some of the things that Beethoven wrote, some of the things that Beethoven wrote were extremely violent, and in comparison to that violence, no. In comparison to, let's see, Brahms' Lullaby,
Yes.
violent.
All right, now, would you consider yourself punk?
Yeah,
You would. Is this your baby?
yeah.
Not a little punkette. You don't call that? Okay. Hi there.
Chubette.
Chubette, yes. You're cute. Chubette, okay. Microphone. I'm in a lot of trouble. I know that right now.
Yes, Dick. You basically have to question the mentality of these people. Why do you have to feel that every day is Halloween? Why not music that loves instead of music that hates? This is just a few questions that I have.
Is that the right one? Okay.